Here, so we will officially get started. We have an incredible crowd out here. Thank you all for coming. Typically, we do these events over at the library, and they will continue there next month. But we figured we'd have a couple extra people here tonight, so we found a bigger venue. What we usually do at our library events is we go through a project update, and we'll step through what the contractor's been working on, how they're building the new bridge, why certain things are the way they are in the construction, and then we'll have a little demonstration on some of the engineering principles that go into the bridge, and then a question and answer session. So tonight, I think we're going to just provide a little bit of information and focus mostly on questions, and provide as much information as we can that everyone's interested in. And I have brought a helper tonight to save me. This is Brennan Dolan. I don't know if you want to
I can
introduce yourself.
So it's good to see some familiar faces. For those of you who remember being at the very first public meeting in this building in 2017, I was part of the cultural resource team that worked through that process as well as the NEPA process for the project. So I reached out. Clayton and I interact somewhat regularly. Reached out to Clayton and I said, hey, I haven't been to Lansing this year. I felt bad I didn't get to fish days. I'm overdue, so I was going to come up just in support of Clayton. Didn't ask for help, but I reached out and offered. So just trying to bring some of the long-term perspective on some of the things we've considered in ultimately picking this alignment, this bridge type, and why some of those decisions were made the way they were. Because ultimately, that's what narrows the contractor down to where we're working today and the situation that we're in currently. Okay? So for those of you who I haven't seen for a while, good to see you. And it's always nice to be back in Lansing.
All right, thanks, Brennan.
Yeah.
So to start with, I thought we would go through a little bit on what's going on right now. So the big news is that we have switched our operations, and we originally were intending to keep the existing bridge open until the new bridge was constructed and open to traffic. Lately, we found through several issues that that's not safe to proceed with, so we have switched to demolishing the existing bridge before we can safely proceed with the construction of the new bridge. And that is due to the installation of some deep foundations in close proximity to the existing bridge. So what is likely happening is that we're working in this big sea of sand. There's about 120 feet of sand out there. Our new bridge foundations go down to bedrock. They go all the way through that sand, and then they go another 30, 40 feet into that bedrock. The existing bridge is just sitting on timber piling, which are trees, trunks. They're 40, 50 feet long, and they are just sitting there in that sand. So when we're working in that sand next to the existing bridge, the vibrations and the impacts have a large effect on the existing bridge, and they have a much larger effect than anyone anticipated during the design process. So that's why we've communicated to everybody that the intent was to keep this bridge open throughout the process and to not have to close it. And now, through the construction process, again, we found that that's just not possible with the location of the new bridge. And something we can get into is why are we building the bridge so close? So, through the process, we knew it was very important to comply with all federal codes and regulations. So there are several out there. The big ones are the National Historic Preservation Act and the National Environmental Policy Act. And they're massive documents. If you're ever looking for something to read at night, you can kind of read through those. But there is a process that they establish that we have to follow. And I won't go through that entire process. Brennan is a huge part of that and a huge help. And I'm not an expert on it, but what I do know is that You have to work with the local community, the local stakeholders, agencies like the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Army Corps, and the Coast Guard, and the DNR, and several others to come up with a plan and several alternative locations for the bridge. Right. So, some of you may be familiar with some of the public information meetings that we initially held for the project. And we came in here and you saw an alignment that extended off of Main Street. And you saw an alignment, I believe that was further north.
Yep, and we had one, I think if you guys recall, all the way down on John Street too. So all of that process, going through that, narrowed down to what I still affectionately refer to as the blue alternative, but that became our alternative, largely because of the properties that we had to avoid. I think most people in this room are aware of the richness of the refuge. Obviously, we're mandated to minimize our effects from that kind of a resource also, which set us on path for the blue alternative.
Yep.
One of the things that I would want to underscore in this discussion would be the amount of geotechnical work that did go on as we were moving through preliminary design and then the final design. That factored prominently into the construction documents that we prepared and the methods that the contractor would bid their construction abilities on. But I think it's probably not hard to foresee that it's not possible to control all of those variables. And that really does paint the picture as to the decision where we're at, and obviously putting safety out in front. As an agency, that's a core value for us. It has to be. If you've lived in Lansing very long at all, you've had one of those mornings where you drive to the bridge and it was closed. Emergency closures. The one I'll always remember was 2011. That was when the second Dolphin went in, but that summer there was a crack on one of the members. You guys probably remember that was in the news. Throughout that time period and even into the 90s, there was certainly, we were certainly aware of some movement on the bridge piers, but it really just speaks to the dynamic nature of the bend in the river and the really, really deep depth you have to get to bedrock here. If you recall, for those of you who were present back in 2017, 2018, those first few public meetings we were kicking off, that was when we started doing geotechnical work. And I'll never forget, we got the data in from our first core, and it was 126 feet to get down to anything that was even solid, relatively solid, not bedrock, but relatively solid underneath the sand. And that's an eye-opener. So, very complex in terms of the geotechnical, the geology underneath the river, the shifting elements there, and that, again, paints the picture in terms of the situation we're in today.
And,
Question?
I'm fine with one if Clayton, if you're ready.
yeah. Good.
What are you going to do different in the future to prevent something like this from happening again?
That's a really good question. So you're probably familiar with Sebula, where we've had a similar issue.
I'm not familiar with it. I'm an engineer, so I have some understanding of the process. And this is very disappointing that we have to go through this and the city has to suffer in this way in the amount of money. So what are you going to do to prevent this from happening again?
Sure, and that's an excellent question. First of all, I want you to know that we hear your disappointment and we share in it, right? The years we've spent coming, my hair was not this gray when I started coming to Lansing.
I always said something initial.
No, but I think your point is a good one. And that's the amount of caution we're going to take into the next one of these types of projects. As you can imagine, as you know, there's not that many river crossings for us down the river, right? They are critically important. I'm working on a bridge on the other side of the state right now over in Decatur, Nebraska. That's Iowa 175. But I think the caution that we need to exercise, and not just double checking, but going beyond that to ensure that the plans we're putting together avoid, to the best of our ability, talked about our ability to control some variables, but not all, but avoid to the best of our ability the situation that your community members, businesses are in. Keep in mind, I'm not an engineer, so I might point to Clayton for more of the engineering side.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of interested, not necessarily now, but what is it that you're looking, excuse me, what is it that you're looking to change, that you're looking to do? And you may not know it now, but it would be, I find it interesting, and that has to be done.
So Brennan, we haven't even gotten into the federal processes yet, but through those processes, we were fairly limited on our options. Is there anything we can do different with those processes, or was this a situation where we picked the option with the best chance of keeping the bridge open, but it wasn't a guarantee?
Well, I would say, so Clayton mentioned two pieces of legislation earlier, NEPA and then the National Historic Preservation Act. We're within the Lansing City Commercial Historic District, recently listed not too long ago. The National Register of Historic Places, the listing process, that grew out of the same legislation that we comply with. But there's another piece there's actually three pieces, I would say. There's the U.S. Department of Transportation Act of 1966, and that directs agencies like ours to find an alternative that has the least social and environmental impacts. It's largely a result of the interstate highway system from the 50s, where there was no consideration of environmental impacts or social impacts. Going through this process, again, if you go back to the EA and all those alternatives, blue alternative is the one that we could deliver on time, on schedule, with the least amount of impacts to a myriad of resources, like the refuge, like the historic district, like some of the other historic properties in and around where the alternatives fell. So it's complex. I remember telling our district engineer at the time in 2017, Lansing is the type of community that has every resource out there. And that holds true today. That's a good thing. That gives a community like Lansing character. It's the kind of thing that makes Fish Days a rich place to come and visit. It also forces an agency like ours to take a lot of deep consideration when we look at a project like this. I don't know how many people remember the time it took us to look at rehabbing the bridge, but that process in and of itself was over a year just for this project. So there's a lot of consideration. The blue alternative was the one alternative that we could deliver the bridge on.
Yep. And that had the lowest impact on the cultural and environmental resources.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tough spot to be in, but what I see is that we were faced with a few decisions. We had to comply with federal code, go through the processes, and due to that code, we were limited to the blue alignment, which the code doesn't have a lot of consideration for constructability, right?
There's some element to that. Keep in mind the proximity of some of the other alternatives. I don't know what it profoundly changed the geotechnical setting. I mean, closer to the turn probably introduces more complexity just based on the variability, the effect from rising, lowering river levels. But Lansing is a complex setting, period. So.
Yep.
Anyways, I think that context is important. Obviously, we'll focus on the future in our plans tonight, but I think that background is important for folks to know.
Yeah. But our intent was always to keep the bridge open, and the other options were to just demolish it and build it in the same alignment, right? And that wasn't acceptable to us. Or we could have built it where it is, or we could have just not replaced it at all. And the only acceptable option to us was to try to build it in the blue alignment right next to the existing bridge. So
the other advantages to that too, obviously the tie-in on the Wisconsin side, and then in Lansing, the closer we were, the quicker it made that transition when the new one was ready. So, but constructability was heavily considered also in that process.
So I guess we've got to the point where we've selected the alignment. We went through the design process, worked with several excellent consultants that helped us out, produced the design, and then started construction. And through construction, we found that using some of the only methods available to us, there still were issues with the foundations of the existing bridge. And several times you've noticed we had to close it for emergency closures, like Brendan mentioned, and that was due to safety concerns. So the bridge, with our monitoring system, had moved further than what we considered a safe threshold, and so we closed it. The first time, we went to the extent to repair it. So we actually removed several spans of the existing bridge, set them on the side, built new piers, and then set those existing spans back on the new piers that were reconstructed in the original location. And that got us past what we thought was some of the closest proximity construction. We did some testing out in the river. We drove piles right next to the existing bridge at the Pier 3 and Pier 2 locations. Those piles, when we drove them 15 feet away from the bridge, did not cause any movement. And we used that to make a decision to continue, to do the repair, and then to continue with construction. What we found was that the construction of the pier in the middle of the river had a very minor influence on the existing bridge. It was enough that we could get the deep foundations in place and keep the bridge open. But when we got to the temporary shoring towers, which are steel towers that will come up out of the river and support the truss as we erect it from pier to pier. Those are smaller pipe pile that go down to bedrock, and we did not anticipate that those would have an influence on the existing bridge after that testing. But for whatever reason, 17 feet away, so further away, they still had an influence on the bridge, and we had another emergency shutdown when the sensors picked up more movement. So it was at that point we started analyzing the structure in a much more detailed way. We had our engineering firm actually model the structure with a finite element model, which means in a computer, they use a computer program to put every single member and every connection in that model, and then they moved the pier in that model and figured out how stressed some of the members got. And they could use that to tell us that it was safe in its current condition, that it's out there today. And they also can use that to tell us that you don't have room to move it anymore. It's not safe to keep going. It's not safe to keep driving this piling. You guys need to shut it down and demolish it first before you continue with the new bridge. So that's where we took their recommendation. We, like Brennan said, safety is one of our core values, and it's number one. That's what we hold most valuable. So it was an incredibly difficult decision. I think I personally pushed it, and I didn't want to accept it at first. I wanted to keep doing more analysis. I wanted to keep pushing that structures group. I wanted to squeeze another 2-3 inches out of there, and it came to the point where, like I said, it wasn't safe, and we had to do something to shut it down. So now we are working to move forward and minimize that impact on the community the best we can. The first step when we switch to the demolition is we have to put together a demolition plan, and that plan details every step, how we're going to remove the decking, remove the rails, remove some stringers underneath the decking, and then attach explosives and implode the structure from the center span over to Wisconsin. That is a very detailed plan, and it has to be done right to be done safely. So it takes time to put together, and that's where we're coming up with this. I'm sure you guys have heard that October 15th date.
Yes.
So that is the earliest it could possibly get approved with the minimum review times. That's not the date that we're saying we're going to close it. That's just our internal date that's kind of gotten out there that we can't possibly move faster than October 15th. So it could be later, depending on the review of that demolition plan. and how that process moves forward. It could be later this fall, even early, hopefully not early winter, but you know, we can't know how fast that approval process is going to go. So that's where we're at with setting up the demolition. The contractor has been able to continue working on the new bridge on the portions that don't involve driving piling or any vibrations. They have finished, they're working on Pier 1 right now on the Iowa Bank. Next Thursday, there will be a large 530 cubic yard concrete pour to finish the columns and the pier cap. And they're working much more on the Iowa side, because instead of erecting the steel truss from the pier out in the middle of the river towards Wisconsin, like we were originally intending to do, now they're going to erect the truss from the Iowa side all the way east, so just in one continuous construction. So they've been working on the abutment, on the first pier, and then coming up soon you'll see some more shoring towers show up, and for them to set the steel on the Iowa side, and steel should be showing up here sometime mid-September, October, pretty soon. So you'll see some activity over there. We're doing that to find the fastest possible construction timeline that we can get this bridge done in now. So we had to switch to demolition. That means we can't work on the span over on the Wisconsin side. So now we're getting work done on the Iowa side where we can get it done. And our objective now is to make sure that construction goes as fast as possible. We are discussing working longer shifts, more days per week, which has to be done strategically. We are limited by how fast they can produce the steel over in Gary, Indiana. So we don't want to work 12-hour shifts 7 days a week just to run out of work, to outpace the steel factory. But we want to be strategic and get it done faster where we can. And so those are all being considered at this time. And we are also working on a car ferry to minimize the impact to the best of our ability. So we can't influence everything as the Department of Transportation, but we can influence transportation. So that's where we're going after what we can go after, and that is a car ferry. So we've been working on that for a while now. We've identified some of the best locations where we can possibly land that ferry, and we're working with local stakeholders and agencies to get approvals necessary to be able to use other agencies' property to run this ferry. So again, there's a lot of that red tape and approval process, and it all takes time, but so far, everybody's been great to work with. They understand the need and the importance of getting this car ferry set up. So we are very optimistic with the progress that we've made, and we're targeting to have that ferry ready to go the day that, or at least within close proximity to when the bridge is closed. So the main provider we're looking at right now, and we're trying to work with them and see if it works out, is the Cassville ferry down in Cassville, Wisconsin. So they wrap up about the end of October with their operational season, and then we're talking about bringing that ferry up here for the winter and operating it over the winter. So that will give us time to go after a few other options that we're looking at for permanent solutions. There's a ferry out there, there aren't many. Surprisingly, they're not just sitting around waiting for people to buy them.
We haven't had much luck garage sailing either.
There is a 1940s model out there that has some newer engines. They're not 1940s engines, but it does need some updating. So that'll take a little bit of time, something we're hoping we can get done over the winter, and then have a long-term solution for the rest of the project. That solution time frame I haven't mentioned, but I guess the opening of the new bridge is another hot topic. With our construction efforts and looking at that minimum time frame of getting that new bridge built, We're looking at sometime mid-2027, so it is a 2-year time frame, and that's why this impact is so great, and we're really focusing on finding an alternative. So, big picture, we are actively working on everything we can. That car ferry is really the big target for us. And I guess the details about a car ferry, one expectation, there are about, there's 2,300 vehicles per day that cross the bridge on average. The car ferry will be able to run about 700 a day. So we're going to be fairly, it's not going to be a perfect solution. There's going to be limitations, and breaking ice in the winter is going to be a big challenge. But like I said, we're doing everything we can to get every car possible across that river. That's, I guess, all I can think of off the top of my head for information that we've been asked about. Brennan, did you have any other comments before we go to questions?
I don't think so. I would just share, as I mentioned, I kind of had a role in this project pre-construction. Back at it with some of the permitting to go on for the seawall or the river wall for the ferry. But I want you to know it's extreme priority for us to deliver to the best of our ability in terms of mobility for the folks in this room and in this community. It's number one priority right now. I was telling Bruce, I was in Sioux City the last 2 days, but I got over here today because I think it's really important that you guys understand at least the best Clayton and I can communicate the work we're putting in to try to find a solution that's a better fit than nothing. So,
Yep. Thanks, Brennan.
yeah.
So anybody want to lead off with the first question?
Compare the original budget to what this thing is going to cost as you look into the future.
The question was, so compare the original budget to what this bridge will cost in the future, to what we're projecting for costs. Brennan, do you have the original 70 million, 80 million?
Well, yeah, I mean, going through the design alternatives, the different bridge types had costs associated. There was nothing lower than, I want to say 75. Letting was
124. And then, well, I guess something to look at, what year are we talking about with 75 million?
that would have been 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
And so what I've seen in our documentation is that we've seen about a 20% increase in inflation for construction costs on an annual basis, somewhere around there from our contracts office. And so 75 million in 2018 dollars is fairly different from 75 million in 2025 dollars. But what we had was 75. Our engineering estimate, after we came up with every component of the new bridge, we had the final design. The engineer came up with about 140 million, and the project came in at 124. So we came in quite a bit low compared to our estimate.
And we had 4 bids?
I think we had 5.
5 bids? Okay.
So we had several competitive bids, and looking at the future, so right now we're at about 135 million with change orders and some of the expenses we've gone to reorganize this construction schedule and to get everything adjusted and account for some previous issues. We're looking at about another 18 million to just completely change everything, start off with a fresh start, and start with a project that involves demolishing the existing bridge.
Does it include the repairs you made to the old bridge?
Yes. Yep, that was only about 1.9 million.
Only.
Yeah. We got a deal on that one. But, yeah, the construction, yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, wasn't the construction contract for this bridge a lump sum deal? Is it unit price or?
Yep, so,
You should have one number to start with. 125 million to put the bridge in. And then after that, it's extras.
Yep, so in Iowa, we do low bid, and we have what we call bid items. So we pay the contractor per cubic yard of concrete that they put into the bridge, and we pay per pound of steel. And so we have hundreds of bid items that we pay for as the contractor progresses through the project. And we make what we call progress payments. But
I understand that part, but isn't it still a lump sum bid?
I guess maybe I'm not as familiar with that, but I don't think I would call it something.
Yeah, so the contracting I do is different than Clayton, but a true lump sum would be atypical for most projects. That's not to say there's not a low dollar amount, but through change orders, quantity estimates that have to be revised, additional work days, those things are all subject to change.
Yep. So in the back.
So just to be clear, you're going to shut down construction on the Wisconsin side and start working on the Iowa side prior to demolition of the bridge? Yeah. And then, so my question is, do you anticipate or do you foresee any closures of Highway 26 or on Front Street while that is being constructed?
Yeah, so the question was, do we anticipate any closures of Iowa 26 or Front Street during construction?
Exactly.
So we will have to, it was always intended to close Front Street at a location that was closed because we had to build a bridge over top of it.
Yep.
Iowa 26, we're going to have some very limited closures at night to bring some cranes and equipment, so from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. We'll close it down, bring in some equipment, and then reopen it. No intended long-term closures. When we redo the roadway, we're going to do it in stages. So we'll build south half first, keep the north half open, and then we'll switch, and we'll do the other side. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, there was a great environmental study, social impact study done before this bridge was enacted. At what time and how long will we see a new social, environmental, and financial impact study survey done because of this change? Who do we need to contact, and you guys have a role in that at all?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, good question. I'm gonna try to summarize. Bear with me. With the change in the project that would include the ferry, is there a change to our overall NEPA document? That includes, you might recall this was an environmental assessment. Have you seen the document, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And you know that there's, I'm sorry?
I've seen most of the documents.
Okay. And then you know that that process concludes with what's called a FONSI, a finding of no significant impact. This would be a reevaluation of that document, and that is underway currently. So Clayton mentioned some of the permitting that needs to go on. I think you guys probably, or people have seen, our muscle team is out again. We're attaching the ferry location assessments to some of their regular work they were doing this fall. So that reevaluation is underway currently. It's not a new document, it's a reevaluation of the existing document because the project is still underway. Is that a better answer to your question?
It is. My big concern is just for the citizens of Lansing.
Sure.
You were looking at social impact on it. That also comes down into a financial impact on the city. Was there a contingency for this? Is there a plan to reevaluate that with the loss of traffic income? Is this something you guys can partake in, or do we need to go elsewhere for that?
So again, that reevaluation is underway. If there's a specific question you might have about a chapter or a sub-chapter in the EA, I can put you in contact with the document manager. I play a role in that, but the social element is not the role that I play specifically. I don't want to misstep, but I think big picture, the take home would be the reevaluation is a part of anytime we expand the footprint of a project or change an element of it, like anticipated demolition after the new bridge was open versus a demolition and closure for 20 months, 24 months.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for the question.
All right, who's next? So your hand first, sir?
I live across the river in Wisconsin. What is the role of the state of Wisconsin, and are they doing anything to help you with this project?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a really good question. So Wisconsin, the way that our border bridges work is that we kind of trade every other one. So Iowa is the lead, what we call the lead state for the Blackhawk Bridge, and then Wisconsin is the lead state for the Prairie du Chien Bridge. So we are administering the contract while Wisconsin is splitting the cost 50-50. They are very involved with the project. They offer every resource they have to us. They have a project manager that works with me, and we kind of work together on some of these issues that come up. And then, like when the information about the bridge closure came out, it wasn't just Iowa that the decision went through, it also went through Wisconsin. And so that went all the way up to the Wisconsin governor, and it went all the way up to the Iowa governor on the Iowa side, and there was concurrence from both sides before any official decision was made. Did that kind of answer your question?
That's a great start. Thank you.
On a micro level, today, I had multiple email exchanges with my counterpart on the other side. And that's typical for like resource specialists all the way through construction at Clayton. We're talking regularly, hey, what does Iowa DNR need? What does Wisconsin DNR need? That kind of exchange.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I think I saw another question over here.
Clayton, I just wanted to say that I think the state and the DOT are doing a good job of trying to figure out this car ferry, obviously, and it shows that you're worried about business in the community, citizens that are working across the river and vice versa. Looking at like October 15th, you said that would be like the earliest time to close the bridge if you got all your permits in order and stuff like that. I'm just thinking about like the leaf season and stuff like that, which is probably the peak of that. Would the DOT be willing, even if they have their permits in order, to push that back until the first part of November? And if so, I mean, what effect would that have on the whole process?
Yeah, so I guess the question was, could we look into delaying the closure to accommodate maybe some of the tourists and leaf season and make sure people can still get to Lansing throughout the fall? So that is something we've looked at. It's a question that's come up, and it's a really difficult discussion. So it comes down to every day that you delay that demolition, you're just delaying the completion of the project, and you're also delaying the contractor in construction. So that could be anywhere around $20,000 a day for every day that you delay that. So, and that's, it's really hard to look at that and assess a value to the city for that. Is it worth $20,000 a day to do that, or do we just get it done as fast as possible? And that's kind of what we've been looking at.
Well, I appreciate that. I think, and I get the financial part with the contractors and stuff like that, but I'm more concerned with the businesses here in Lansing.
All right, yes.
Well, part to his question and what you said there, so on the tail end of the contract for the businesses and the people in the communities on both sides of the river, is there something that holds the current contractor accountable if they go past their deadline? Because we're talking about this is going to affect, people on the front side. What keeps them accountable on the back side? Because I'm born and raised in Lansing. That river goes up and down. There's so many factors with the ferry that can be affected by flooding, affected by ice. What holds them accountable? And 27, when oops, we're not done, it's going to be 28.
Right. So we are, the question was, what holds the contractor accountable if there was a delay on their end and the project is not complete in time? So every one of our contracts is let with site conditions and site times. So we establish a point in time when the project has to be complete by. This gets kind of complicated, but one way we account for that is what we call working days. And so we give the contractor 560 working days to finish the project. And so every day that it's not raining and they can progress on the project, we charge them a working day. And then if they run out of working days before the project's supposed to be complete, then we assess what we call liquidated damages. And those, so every day they go past that limit, they would be assessed a financial, I don't want to call it a penalty, but it's what we call damages. And so we have that on this project. We're actually rewriting some of the contract with this change. So we're looking at establishing a calendar date. And we say that it's this date, and if you go past this date, then it's this much every day you go past it. So there are some consequences for not getting it done on time.
Conversely, does he get rewarded if he finishes early?
Sometimes, but not on this project, unfortunately. We do have some projects with an early completion bonus or an incentive disincentive clause. When we originally let this, the intent was always to have a crossing, and so we didn't see any value in getting a new bridge faster as long as we had one of the crossings to operate. And now it's not really appropriate to say we're going to give you $20 million if you finish early. But
How much will the weather affect the demolition? Like when you get into winter, or does that make a difference?
It definitely does. So the question was, how much does the weather affect the demolition of the bridge? And we are really hoping for some nice mild winters. So we have to, like I said, safety is our core value. We have to consider the construction crews in that value. And so we can't expect them to be out there in -7 weather, 100 feet in the air, putting together bolts for the steel truss. And so there will be a safety threshold. If it's too cold to work, then we're not going to push it. And same would go for snow and ice. You can't have somebody walking on a steel beam covered in ice either. Yeah,
You're waiting for it, weren't you?
I knew it. Maybe you'd have something good.
So do they have the main beam structures already built for it's got to be transferred in, they probably already have it built yet.
Yeah, so the question is, do they have some of the main steel members built and ready for the bridge? And the answer is yes, they do. They've been working on producing the steel beams for the Wisconsin side, because that's where we were intending to start. But as soon as we had the decision to switch, the factory switched to the Iowa side, and now they have quite a few of those complete. They need to be coated and shipped out, but that's where we should have Iowa steel going up this fall, so they'll be ready for us. Yeah, they're making good progress out at the plant.
What was the main channel, I was thinking?
Stuff, the cantilever stuff
Point B.
over the main channel, yeah, they're working on that too. So how they're going to build it, I guess I could almost use the wall murals, but so they're going to start on the Iowa side. Hopefully I don't get this wrong right in front of David. So we're going to, and I'm crowding the camera over here too. So this is what we call an abutment, and that's where the bridge touches down, and that's that concrete structure that you see that's pretty close to 2nd Street that they've been working on. They're going to start putting steel up at that abutment, and then there will be shoring towers in between the pier and the abutment. So they'll put a piece of steel out to the first shoring tower, start working on the truss there, and then put a piece of steel out to the next shoring tower, and so on, until they're done with this first part of the steel truss that goes out to the pier, and then they can work on this is what we call the cantilever section, and so we won't have this part in the middle. We're only going to have from the pier out to about here, And they call it a cantilever because it's hanging out there without any support. And so this will be, they'll build that cantilever section that I just mentioned, and then we're gonna jump the middle, and we're gonna start working from the pier in the middle of the river to Wisconsin. And once we have this ready, then we'll build the cantilever on the Wisconsin side. And the final piece will be building the center section on barges. So they're gonna build that center section on the river, they're going to float it in place underneath the new bridge and lift them up with what we call strand jacks, which are just really big jacks that hold onto cables and pull that entire truss up in the air.
Basically, the way they made the old one.
I think they did the old one stick by stick. I don't know if they lifted that into place.
Oh, God, there's that.
I wish we could use helicopters, that'd be pretty
So where, yeah, come back over. So I think you said that the unsafe movement was from trying to put pilings down to make a new shoring tower. Is that somewhere in the middle of the water somewhere?
Yep.
You were going to do that, or that's, because the pier number 2 is already built, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and now you're looking at pier 1.
So what we were working on with the movement, so if you picture the new bridge right next to this bridge right here, the new pier is about here, and then we were building the shoring towers for this slides down here, what this would sit on as they build it. So the shoring towers were kind of close to pier 3 here,
Okay.
and that's,
But pier 3's already done too, right?
this is the existing pier 3.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Pier 3 is on the Wisconsin bank,
Okay.
and then
The new pier 3?
the new Pier 3 is on Wisconsin bank up here.
Oh, okay, okay.
Pier 2 is kind of 100-foot setback from the existing Pier 2, and then Pier 1 is on the Iowa bank.
So where you're causing the vibrational problem was on that Wisconsin site, in between those.
Yep. Between the new Pier 2 and new Pier 3. Yep. It gets kind of confusing talking about all the different piers. So, yeah.
One other question, because you said you guys were talking back and forth with Wisconsin DOT. So with the closure of the existing bridge and with the project that's going on north of Prairie on 35, what's Wisconsin DOT saying about that? Because that'll be an integral part of when this bridge is shut down, getting people around and back to this side. So
Yeah.
what's Wisconsin DOT's expected projection on completion of that project?
So the question is, when is Wisconsin DOT projecting that they're going to complete the Highway 35 project between Prairie and Linksville? Between Prairie and Linksville. They are actively working on getting that done before any detour gets put in place. I don't think we have a set date yet, but we've been coordinating, and to figure out detour signing, we need to know when they're getting done too. So that's something that's in the works. We don't have an exact date yet, but they're working on it. All right, who else has a question for us? Not gonna let us off the hook that easy.
So, two bridges gonna be done, then they're gonna tear this whole Main Street out.
Oh, yeah. Main Street's another,
This dam, and
so that's been another discussion. So how many people have heard about the coming Iowa 9 replacement project through town? Right. Quarter of you? So the DOT is planning to replace Iowa 9 or Main Street through town, and that was supposed to be after the completion of the new bridge, when we hadn't had much impact to the city, everything had been kept open. So now that we are closing the crossing, they're looking at pushing that project back a little bit to give Lansing a few years to recover, and then repaving Iowa 9 through town. But that's the latest I've heard, unless Mike, did you, that's pretty accurate?
there will be a meeting next week, right? The city, yeah, the second meeting. They'll get that later with the
So more meetings to come. I'm guessing there'll be public information meetings on that one, if you're interested, coming up. Yeah.
Now, who's leading the Main Street, doing that project?
So that, we have, we've split the state up into districts, and there are 6 districts. We all live in District 2 in the northeast corner, and that district is headquartered out of Mason City. And so Mason City is in charge of developing the project and administering it, getting it ready to go. They have not assigned it to any particular construction office yet, but I would definitely assume that New Hampton, the resident construction engineer in New Hampton, would be in charge of that project. So, yeah, good question. Yeah.
Where's the ferry gonna dock on each side? How's it gonna get under the big slough bridge if you're gonna go there? And I really doubt you're gonna keep the ice off the river.
It's going to be a challenge. So we're looking at, on the Iowa side, we're looking at just south of the Tiki Bar, that space where the dock is, that's open. We'd have to take the dock out, but that's really the only viable location where we can keep the operation very close to the contractors and have them help us out with ice breaking, because they'll be keeping the river open for themselves all winter, as long as it doesn't freeze too hard. And then we can have them just come up the river just a little bit to the Tiki Bar and keep that channel open, so we can go underneath the existing bridge and then go over to the Army Corps' beneficial use site and land right on the Wisconsin shore there. And then we would have to build a road through the beneficial use site, and then you would use that entrance that goes to the boat ramp on the other side of the bridge. And that's what we're looking at now, but again, there's a lot of different coordination that has to go on. There's permits, and there's a lot of areas that are not certain yet.
Would it run more than 8 or 10 hours? Maybe 15 hours a day, 24/7?
Yep, so the question is, will the ferry run more than 8 hours?
Well, yeah.
We're looking at 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's our goal. If we can't find a captain and crew to operate, we'd obviously have to reassess that goal. But for now, we're shooting for that time frame.
Clayton, you probably can't answer this, but going back to the Highway 9 Main Street project, wouldn't it make more sense to actually bump it up rather than push it back, because we're not going to have many, business patrons?
Yep. So that's something we looked at right away. Could we do the Iowa 9 repaving project while the bridge is closed to just get it all done at once and not come back again? You guys can run me out of town. But the reality is that there are processes we have to follow, like those same federal processes, and you can't just rubber stamp them and make them go faster. So we've looked into it, and we just can't get the project developed fast enough for that to be an option. Yeah.
And that was supposed to start in 2027?
I think 2028.
Yeah, 28.
So what we need is a mild winter. What we need is a mild winter.
We need 2 of them.
We'll take whatever we can get.
Exactly. So, are we coming up on time here? Getting pretty close. So, any other questions y'all have?
Thank you for the meeting
Yep.
and the opportunity to ask
We
questions.
got one over here. Yeah, thank you.
What allowance will you be making for high water in the spring if you're gonna be docking at the Tiki Bar, because that access road goes underwater at, what, 5 or 10 year flood level?
Yep. So I don't think it would be responsible of us to communicate that this is going to be the absolute perfect solution. It's going to run every day of the year, and there aren't going to be any shutdowns. There will be periods, like if we get a month-long flood, we won't be able to run for a month, but that's due to the locations that we have. We looked extensively in the area, and nothing else facilitates ice breaking like this location does. So losing the winter is a much bigger impact than losing a month of flooding. And there's always the unknown of breakdowns of the ferry. So there will be periods where the ferry is down for service and inspections. So I don't want to set the expectation that it's going to be out there every day of the year, but it's going to be out there 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, as many days as we possibly can have it out there. Yeah.
One more question that's not related probably to anything, you know, who is the person that is part of this project that business owners and people need to communicate with as far as the economic impact? Who is the person that is their forte in that position and what's going on here?
Sure. So the question is, who's the person that local business owners can interact with on financial impacts? Did I get that right?
Yep.
And I'd say I'm the primary contact for everything regarding the project, but I'm not an expert on financial impacts, like to businesses or the surrounding area. Brennan, do you have
Well, the reason
any idea?
I asked, and like I said, I'll give you a little bit more information on why I asked that. So before this meeting, I've reached out with people that I know in the communities on both sides of the river and local in town here that I've known since I grew up here. And, you know, when it was shut down for 2 months, a lot of these businesses, they suffered 45% hits. We've got a nursing home that takes care of our elderly that lost help because of that, because they don't get paid a lot to work there. So you lose that. We've got a grocery store where a lot of people count on that for staples and necessities. To your project, there's going to be a lot of impacts, and there's got to be somebody that's accountable and somebody that's the liaison to communicate between that and the city.
Sure. I would say, the city and I talk on a pretty regular basis. The city can bring up anything they need to me, and I can distribute that to whoever that would go to in the agency. And again, I think it's a challenge for us because we're the Department of Transportation, so we can't really address community financial impacts as well, and that's why we're focusing on the car ferry. But if you have some information or concern or a request, you can absolutely pass that through the city to me, and I will direct that to anyone I can to get that addressed. Yeah, Bruce.
This is not an official announcement or anything, but I do believe that there's something in the works that would provide a couple of marketing experts and would work with the business people and come up with some promotional thoughts, promotional strategies to continue to attract customers. Yeah, I mean, that's a serious discussion. It's not a pie in the sky, but I don't think everything is in place yet.
Okay. So the comment was there could be some resources coming to help businesses out with marketing. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions here? I'm happy to stay until 7 if we got enough questions. My wife and kids might get mad, but that's okay. Nothing else?
How long did you know those piers were sitting on wood piles?
So,
Did you know that before you ever started?
So the question was, how long do we know that there's 1920s construction technology under those piers on the pile? The bridge is, I'm sure most people know here, was built by a private company. That's the Iowa-Wisconsin Bridge Company. It had at least one other design before the cantilever through truss was finalized by Mellon Stone out of the Twin Cities at the time. When the states took over that bridge, when the Iowa-Wisconsin Bridge Company couldn't reopen the slough bridge, they didn't have the financial ability. Most folks know that history better than I do. As you can imagine, that's not a scenario we encounter a lot as a state agency, right? There's a handful of examples around the state where we have infrastructure as part of our facilities that we didn't build, or the Iowa Highway Commission didn't build. So we did get shop drawings from the bridge, a lot of the lattice connections on the steel. Iowa Wisconsin Bridge Company gave us nothing for the piers. There was nothing that existed. So truthfully, the best source of information are the historic accounts. I think most folks have seen the 1931 Black Hawk Bridge booklet. That description of the oak pile underneath and the truckloads of oak coming into town is as detailed as anything that's out there. But I will say, in terms of historic infrastructure, it's not unusual for Clayton and I to track down some plans from the 20s. Maybe a box culvert down on Iowa 13, Iowa 76. When you get to a project like this where it came over from a private entity and it's just bits and pieces of a typical package, it's challenging, it's frustrating, it's unsatisfying because it's not what we would have gotten as a state agency through the Highway Commission. But yeah, the record is really what was in the newspaper more or less.
All right, anything else? You guys have had some great questions. I really appreciate you all coming out. I didn't want to say it before you leave. I'm here in the community. I want you guys to feel like I'm as accessible as possible. So if you ever have any more questions, you need to get a hold of me. Our field trailer is just down there in the corner of Main Street, Front Street. Feel free to stop by and ask in person, or you can call my cell phone, which I don't know if you have a pen, but it's 515-239-2376. Or my email is my clayton.burke@iowodot.us. So if you want to email me, come find me. If you see me walking around the street, feel free to always come up and ask whatever you're curious about. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.